All right. Well, welcome everyone to this TMEA regional Zoom meeting at 6 o'clock p.m. on Sunday, the 23rd. And this is the Zoom meeting for the WTVMEA region of the state. Welcome and thanks for logging in today. My name is Brian Russell. I'm the co-director of choirs at Stewart's Creek High School, and I'm the TMEA All-State Choral Chair. Before we get to any parts where we're going to ask questions and have discussion, I did prepare a PowerPoint. That's really just to keep me honest and keep me organized to make sure that I don't forget things and that all the needed information gets out there. So we'll start with that, but a vast majority of the meeting will be all of the questions and discussions that we need to have about this. So let me start by sharing my screen here. And we'll do this guy. So I'm going to assume that you can see the screen here that says All-State 2027. If you can't, let me know, but I'll assume that you can. So at today's meeting, things that I think we need to cover is a brief history of how we got here. While this proposal didn't get sent out till this year, it actually was created in the 2022-2023 school year. Things have changed since then, and I think examining where we started and where we are now will be important to understanding how we got here. Kind of pulling the curtain back and talking about the work that this committee did that created this proposal, the questions that were asked and how those answers ended up yielding this proposal. Actionable steps, things that we do have control over, things that we can do right now, and then finally questions and discussion. So a little bit of the history. In April of 2022, we, the choral directors in Tennessee, voted to add freshmen to All-State. There were no nuts and bolts involved in that, and we wouldn't expect that out of a large choral caucus like that. So in the summer of 2022, then President Ryan Fisher appointed a committee of folks from across the state to look into how this could come to fruition. He appointed the 6 regional presidents and vice presidents of the vocal associations. From ETVA, Kristen Weirham and Will Breimer; MTVA, Lorna Pica and TJ McLaughlin; from WTVMEA, President Adrian Macklin and then Vice President Rachel Hudgens. He also appointed 3 TMEA choral folks that were held positions in TMEA at the time. Then President Demetrius Robinson, TMEA choral chair; Susan Kelly, who was the choral performing ensembles chair for TMEA; and myself, TMEA All-State choral chair. The 9 of us were tasked with trying to figure out what would be the next steps and ultimately what would it look like to add 9th graders to All-State. Let's look back at where we were when this committee started working in fall of 2022. ETVA was just starting to transition to even auditioning freshmen as a part of their All-East process. In fact, before that, they had a freshman honor choir, but it was done by director recommendation only. In fall of 2022, if memory serves me correctly, was their first year even having auditions for freshmen in the east part of the state. As a part of their bylaws, every school is guaranteed 1 student to make All East as a freshman. And that's where they currently are right now as well. MTVA had separate honor choirs for freshmen that meet at a different time as their 10th through 12th mid-state choirs. MTVA has a mixed and a treble freshman honor choir. And correct me if I'm wrong, WTVMEA folks, but back then, as it is now, freshmen could audition against 7th or 8th graders, or they could audition against 10th or 12th graders. But in fall of 2022, freshmen were not yet eligible for All-State. When we started this committee work, it's important to realize that TMEA had not yet signed a post-2026 contract for the conference or All-State. We have now. We're locked in for January conferences from 2027 through 2034. But at the time that this committee was coming up with this document, that was not yet the case. So we kind of had free reign to think, what is it that we want our All-State process to be and our product to be? What do we want students to gain from the process? And let's build the conference around that. During the school year of 22-23, the committee met 7 or 8 times via Zoom and exchanged many more emails than that. In July of 2023, the committee work was done, and we made this recommendation to the TMEA Executive Committee. Number 1, don't add freshmen until 2027. That was our first recommendation to them. Because at the time we were looking at our space constraints that we currently have at Allstate through 2026 and realized we neither have space to add an ensemble to the Tennessee Allstate, and our rooms won't allow us to add capacity to the choirs. If you've supervised those Allstate rehearsals, you realize that they're pretty tight, and increasing that size by 25% would be pretty impossible for most of them and pretty smelly for the tenor bass choirs. And so we didn't have space to do it. And frankly, the committee also said, it's July. We are not in a place where we can reconcile all of these different ways that the regions are handling these auditions. It would be a lot to ask East to figure out how to send freshmen to Allstate if it was their second year even doing auditions for freshmen. So for space and time concerns, we said, let's wait until 2027 to add freshmen to Allstate. And then in 2027, here's an outline of how this would work well for our state. And that outline is what ends up being the proposal that you guys have now. In that month at the summer executive committee meeting, the executive committee voted against what our committee brought to them. They voted to add freshmen immediately, as in like that fall. And you can ask members of the folks who were on that committee why that decision was made. They said, when we add freshmen, we're not going to add any additional seats to Allstate, but just fold in freshmen to our existing capacity. In that year, 23-24, no regions added freshman eligibility. This year, East and West added ninth grade eligibility. MTVA did not. So that's a brief history of how we got to where we are right now. When the committee started working, we really saw this as an opportunity to look at all of our existing Allstate practices. From a historical context, I'm old enough to remember singing in an Allstate choir when it was over 300 students. It was held at the War Memorial Auditorium downtown. We would stay at the Renaissance and walk 5 blocks up to the War Memorial. And we all had, this downtown experience. The reason that our largest Allstate choir is 144 is because War Memorial said, yeah, we can't fit all 300 kids on here ethically and safely. And so the very next year, our Allstate choir went from 300 down to 150 students. To me, I think that's why we have the treble choir, is because we saw all these qualified treble singers that couldn't fit in a 150 voice choir. And then a few years later, we added the tenor bass choir. So from an historical context, we have the sizes that we have now, not necessarily because we were trying to build the best experience for the students, but that was the circumstances that were dictated to us. From a logistical context, we wanted to look at what we were currently doing and decide, well, if we do want to add capacity to Allstate, can we do that? Do we have space to do that? Would there be, a region that, would it be fair to regions to add spaces to this? Are regions going to be able to handle that? So we looked at the logistics. And finally, we considered the process of the Allstate audition and the Allstate event as reflections of our values as music educators in Tennessee. I think a great example of auditions reflecting values would be when we added sight reading to our regional auditions about 10 to 12 years ago. I know my data in Middle Tennessee, the first year that we had sight reading as a part of mid-state auditions, fewer than 20%, I remember 18% even got a passing grade on sight reading. We're now well over 80% of students that pass the sight reading portion of the audition. That shows that at one point, TMEA thought that, well, it is important that we have sight reading as a part of our auditions. And now students are better off for it. We are teaching music literacy better as a state because of those values were represented in those auditions. I think having a treble and a tenor bass choir at Allstate level is a statement of our values. I think we are better as a state at knowing the repertoire for those gender-based choirs than we were before we had them. And as a result, tenor bass singing especially has gotten better. And so all of these we wanted to look at this from a very holistic point of view, is how can we create an audition and event paradigm that's going to reflect what we want and move us forward. We wanted to answer other questions, like when adding freshmen, do we even want to add seats to Allstate? In answering that question, we first asked ourselves, well, what did TMEA do when they added ninth grade to the Allstate bands and orchestras, probably around 2015, 2016 or so? And the answer is it doubled the two all-state bands. Didn't quite double the number of string students because the number of strings in 9th and 10th is a little bit smaller than 11th and 12th, but for all intents and purposes, doubled the number of seats and doubled the number of ensembles. So we decided, as a part of that answer to that question, yes, all state should get bigger when we add freshman eligibility. So we had to ask ourselves, how much bigger should all state get? Should we do what Instrumental did and double all state from 3 to 6 ensembles? Could any venue handle that? Could regionals handle having a similar setup of 6 ensembles? Should we just make the 3 existing choirs bigger? And we had to ask those same questions. Can our rehearsal spaces at any given venue handle a choir of 180 or 200? Do we have a performance space for a bigger ensemble? Currently with 144 in SATB, we use 13 sets of risers. Would we need 18 to make that 25% bigger? That's a pretty big footprint, and that might make it tougher for us to even put all state on if that's what was required. So all these are questions that we had to ask. In terms of auditioning freshmen, we wanted to ask, do we want our freshmen to audition against 7th and 8th graders? I said West Tennessee does that. It's also the model that ACDA follows for many of their honor choirs. We considered that it is more developmentally appropriate, especially if we're talking about having auditions early in the fall semester of the 9th grade year when they're just a month and a half out of 8th grade anyway. Or do we want freshmen to audition against 10th through 12th graders? If we were to go down that route, does that incentivize 14-year-olds to sound older in order to gain the state level distinction that all state gives? Does it all, on the flip side, create an unfair barrier to 9th grade auditionings? So as a part of this committee work, a lot of it was just asking real questions and then thinking about what's best for students and our teachers in order to come up with the proposal. So here's what's actually in the proposal, everyone. And just a data check here, we're on slide 8 of 9, so don't worry, we're almost done. What's in the proposal? We are proposing that each region auditions 9th and 10th graders together and auditions 11th and 12th graders together. Should the regional events move to similar ensemble delineations that all state has? As in, should all West have a 9-10 SATB, an 11-12 SATB, and then a 9-12 SSAA and a 9-12 TTBB? Now I'm going to answer that question here in a second. Here's what's actually in the proposal. To add one all-state choir, we will have a 9-12 SATB all-state choir, an 11-12 SATB all-state choir, 9-12 SSAA, and 9-12 TTBB. Much like we currently do, where we alternate the rankings so that one choir is not seen as better than the other. 9th and 10th grade placements would alternate between the SATB and the gender-based choirs. 11th and 12th grade placements would alternate between the SATB and the gender-based choirs. And what's also in the proposal are timeline considerations that now we have to think about because All-State will be in January of 2027. With All-State in January, we will have to have earlier regional auditions. Second tier is going to have to look a lot different, and our regional events are going to have to be much earlier. Do we need to move to an online auditions platform? That makes tons of sense for second tier. I think there's a lot to be gained from considering doing all West auditions online as well. So that's what's actually in the proposal, and here's what's actually actionable for all of us. Before the caucus, when we meet in April, we need to create an actionable, specific motion. Something that all of us will know this is what we're actually voting on. The proposal, for example, says that each region should do their best to move to the same all-state ensemble number as, or the same regional ensemble number as all-state. I've talked to a few members of WTVMEA, and that seems to be a big concern and something that you're not sure that WTVMEA can do. That's one thing that I want to do today with these 3 Zoom meetings is kind of talk to each region and figure out, well, this part of the proposal works for us, but we don't think we can do this. And then in the next month, let's figure out what is it that as a state we can vote on. So that's what I mean by creating an actionable specific motion. here are the parts of this proposal that we are ready to vote on right now. I'd like to email that out to the members before March 23rd so that everyone can look at it, discuss it amongst you and your colleagues. On March 23rd, we are scheduled a statewide Zoom meeting at 3 p.m. Central Time. And so all directors from the state will be here and we can discuss it before we get to the caucus. The caucus will be Thursday evening, April 10th at 8 p.m. There's not tons of time at any of these caucuses. And so the hope is that by emailing out the motion way before and by having this meeting on March 23rd, everyone will have their vote ready that night and we can discuss and vote on that motion pretty efficiently. If the motion passes, then part of the motion is that each region would come up with a 3 to 5 person task force. It can be more, it can be less, depending on the region. That task force we're going to call the Tiger Team, as in like last season of West Wing Tiger Team. It's a thing. Anyway, this Tiger Team, as each region would then look at, okay, how are we going to do all West in fall of 2026, knowing that all state is January of 2027? How are we going to do our auditions in the second week of September? How are we going to do our auditions the second week of September when WTSBOA is also going to be doing their auditions the second week of September? So each little task force from each region will meet to discuss regional specific dates and venues, regional specific audition considerations. Does the WTVMEA want to do online auditions for All West? Do you want to do in person just for sight reading, but online for prepared? You want to do everything in person? Like just figuring out those things for your region. And then we will also talk, dates, of course, to coordinate with instrumental colleagues, audition rep, and sight reading levels. It makes tons of sense for, 9th and 10th graders to not have to sight read at the same level as 11th and 12th graders. Is that something we want to implement in 2027? 26. We have complete control over that. The idea of an online audition platform. And then finally, this Tiger Team will come together and discuss how this all works as a state. How can we guide our regions to do this together? To talk about what second tier looks like, since that's going to affect all of us. And then finally, do some long-term planning. This can be the committee that kind of starts the process of talking about gradually increasing our sight reading standards. How great would it be for us to say in the year 29 and 30, we're going to add dotted quarter followed by eighth to our 9th and 10th grade mid-state sight reading standards. And that gives us a couple of years to make sure that every 9th and 10th grader is going to be ready for that by the time that we have all West auditions. In 2032, we're going to add leaps within the dominant triad in addition to this leaps in the tonic triad. We're going to add leaps of a fifth instead of just leaps of a third. Being really specific and precise in what we think is important for our students to be able to do, how long we think it's going to take for our directors to get acclimated to that and to teach that. So this Tiger Team will do specific things for the region, statewide guidance thing to help us get ready for the launch of the new all-state paradigm, and then finally some long-term planning that can serve us in many ways. That is the end of my presentation. That's all the knowledge that I think we need to have. And so the way it's worked for the last two meetings, it's just been very much someone ask a question, let's start some discussion. So who wants to be brave and be the first one? Adrian.
Hey, Brian, how are you?
Man, it's so good to see you.
I'm sorry, I'm driving home. I'll try to get my camera on when I pull up.
No, it's a good picture. It's a good picture. That's what I mean. Yeah, it's good.
Uh,
It's good.
I do have one question. I actually like the proposal, as our conversation went the other day. I do. My only concern is there was a vote some time ago about middle school implementation of a choir, and I can't remember when we met at that time on this committee. Um, where does that stand, or is that years on down the road too? I just can't remember what we discussed.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's come up at all the other meetings today as well. And I can tell you, it's important for us to remember, like we voted to, yeah, Rachel, 2019, We voted to add middle school all state before we ever voted to add freshmen. Yeah, 2019 was before COVID, and that's when we voted to add middle school. I can tell you two layers of this. As all state chair, I don't have the bandwidth to add a middle school all state to this because I think it's going to be a lot like building it from scratch. As much as East, Middle, and West are going to have to change a lot of things for our high school auditions, I think there's a bigger discrepancy between East, Middle, West and how we do our middle school auditions. And so adding an all-state level to that is going to require a lot more like thinking through all the different layers. And so here's what that was the first part of it. The second part is 2027 is a perfect time to add a middle school all-state choir. I think this Tiger team that we keep talking about, one of the things that they're tasked with is how do we add middle school to it? I think the Tiger team will be made up primarily of high school directors. So, I mean, a big part of this is going to be who are the mover and shaker middle school directors from our regions that we can get together to start talking about this, whether it's implemented in 26, 27 or a couple of years after that. We have the space in our revised contract with Opryland starting in 2027. It's just a matter of getting people together that are going to put a proposal together, kind of like what we're talking about now, but for middle school. So I think we have a process to start that conversation and get it going. And there's just going to be people taking the ball and running with it. I don't know, Dan. Who's Dan? Dan's phone.
Hey, what's up, Brian? I'm Daniel Massey.
Yeah, there you are. I see it.
Yeah, I
Dan.
just joined. I named my phone Dan's phone, all that kind of stuff. And I'm
I
pretty
got
sure
you.
phone is misspelled too, but whatever. I made it a long time ago. So I have a question, Brian. Thanks for being so succinct in the entire proposal, first of all. I mean,
It's nothing. It's 37 pages long.
well, I mean, when you just presented it.
Okay.
Let's be real, man. Good job. But I have one question about the all-state thing. The second tier audition. Is it going to be the regional judges that will be judging each audition?
So that's also an important part about this. Second tier will also look different. Whereas right now, West, I think, got like 17 per part trebles and 12 per part tenor and basses that end up going to Allstate. I think that was your quota this year. Then what it will look like in 26, 27 is that you're not given a quota. Rather, we're going to say that the top number 24, the top 24 alto ones in 9th and 10th grade will be eligible for second tier. They are not guaranteed a spot in Allstate. Second tier would move to online, and then there would be a panel of judges from West, Middle, and East who would judge the alto ones, 9th grade alto ones in SSAA. A different panel would judge the 9th and 10th grade alto ones in SATB. Another panel would judge the 11 and 12 alto ones. But we're talking about a statewide panel of folks. And then the best kids would go to Allstate. Now, the danger that the committee realized immediately, of course, is that East or West or Middle could run the table, and then all the kids in Allstate are coming from one region. And so there is guaranteed representation
with 6, right?
I forget what's in the proposal, but
I think it's 6. But either way, it's a substantial number.
Yeah, per part.
Per part.
And so it ends up, being possible. So that's how second tier would go. But yeah, the way that the committee sees it is it would be a statewide panel of judges judging one choir's part, ranking them, but you wouldn't know if that kid's from Middle, West, or East, and then the best kids go. So it kind of instead of something that we kind of always have to do with a 3-year average of the number of schools. And
yeah, of course.
Stuff. So yeah.
Okay, well, that's cool. I don't know if that language is in the amendment. Would it have to be?
Would it have to be in I know it's in the proposal.
It is about the one panel of judges from all across.
That I don't know if it actually says, but I think that's something that when I create the motion, I'll definitely either put in there or
Okay.
not, and then we'll send it out. And if you think it ought to be in there or ought not be in there,
And
then
that's
let's
why I brought
discuss
it
that.
up. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that sounds like the best solution. That's what I was gonna say. Hey, how about we make a panel across all the
Okay. Okay.
That's awesome, man.
So that, yeah, that'll be the plan. We'll put it in the motion, and then we can discuss a month from the day when the whole state gets together to discuss the motion.
All right. I appreciate your time, Brian. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Someone else, just jump on in.
Hey, Brian, hold on, let me turn my video back on. There I am. Sorry, I'm hiding from my family in the bedroom. So here is some of the concern in West Tennessee with this proposal, just based on how our regional choirs are set up right now. And that is that we are actually, for our regional choirs, are divided into subregions. So we have a Northwest region and we have a Southwest region. And I could not give you all the ins and outs about exactly why that is, because it's been that way ever since I've been teaching. But what I can gather is that by dividing that way, because Northwest is made up of primarily rural areas, and Southwest, and Adrian can jump in here and help me if he wants to. Southwest is basically Memphis and Shelby County. And so that creates a better opportunity for these smaller rural areas to be able to have students that are able to be a part of a regional honor choir, because it's really difficult when you have, 30 rural schools and they're competing against, Memphis has something like 60 high schools, just Memphis. So it's really difficult, competitively when you have all these, rural areas. I live in a county that has 2 high schools. A lot of our counties only have 1 high school. So neither of our subregions, in my opinion, would be able to voice as many choirs as what this proposal is recommending. Whereas if we join back together, now we're taking opportunities away from those tiny, tiny places again, which was the point of the subdivision in the first place. So I think that's part of why you're getting a lot of blowback from West Tennessee on this proposal. Another reason you're getting a lot of blowback from West Tennessee on this proposal is, and to be completely honest, I'm neutral, because I just have to be. But West Tennessee spent years and years and years, dare I say, begging to add freshmen to the all-state setup that we already had, because we knew there wasn't room to, start adding multiple ensembles. And I mean, people fought tooth and nail against it. I mean, hated the idea, would rather have their fingernails ripped out one by one with pliers than add freshmen to Allstate. And now it feels like to them, all of a sudden, 2 regions of the state that didn't even want to add freshmen now want to add 2 whole choirs of them. And so, that's a lot of the reason that, you're getting some of the blowback from West Tennessee on this, is that we just wanted to add freshmen to what we already had. And when we did that, I'm telling you, it's 5 kids total from West Tennessee, 3 participants, 2 alternates. That's what we have after everything came out in the wash with second tier testing. 3 participants and 2 alternates. And, I think there's going to be, some issue, because we don't have directors that want to bring, 10 freshmen with them to Allstate. We just wanted the ones who were capable to be able to have the opportunity. That's all we wanted. So if you could address both of those things, we'd really appreciate it. And if Adrian wants to add anything, he can do that as well.
Hey, Brian, this is Dustin. Can you hear me?
I can.
I just wanted to say, instead of responding to your email, I think you just got the answer to the ninth graders from West Tennessee.
Got it. Rachel, let me take the second part of what you just did there first. And before I do that, when we create the motion after today, when we take the proposal and we say, all right, here's what the state is going to be able to vote on. It seems from all three that requiring each region to go to 4 honor choirs is not going to be a part of the motion. So I think West Tennessee definitely needs to hear that you'll be able to field however many regional honor choirs that West Tennessee needs to field. Okay. We're only adding 1 choir in addition to the 3 that we have, not 2. So we're not fielding 2 new choirs of just freshmen. And so we're just doing 1 more. And so let's just kind of look at the actual numbers. When this all plays out, I'm looking at my proposal here to make sure I don't give you the wrong numbers. There we go. So for 9th and 10th graders, there would be 18 per part that would go to the 9th, 10th grade SATB. And then there would be 18 per part that go to the, 16 per part that go to the 9 through 12 SSAA. The reason I think that's important is that for the SATB groups, there's going to be 18 per part that go from 9-10, and 18 per part for 11-12. When you look at the 9-12 SSAA and the 9-12 TTBB, there's only 10 per part that go from 9th and 10th grade. And then there's 24 per part that go from 11th and 12th grade. So we're already, although we're adding a choir, many of the seats are going to 11th and 12th graders, not 9th and 10th graders. We're doing that because 11th and 12th graders are more qualified to sing in All-State. And it also mirrors the allocation that we currently have in All-State, that so many are 12th grade, a smaller number are 11th grade, and a really small number are 10th grade. So we're trying to mirror what we currently have in terms of all that. And so really, we're not talking about adding a whole new choir of just freshmen. We're saying that we need 18 plus 10 to go to All-State from 9th and 10th grade. Now, just feasibly, when I look at West's numbers, if all of your 9th graders are auditioning against 10th graders and none of them are auditioning against 7th and 8th graders, well, that's going to increase the number of 9th graders that you have already. When those 9th graders that are auditioning aren't auditioning against 11th and 12th graders and just 10th graders, I also think the number of 9th graders that you have qualify will increase because they're not going up against 17-year-olds in their first month of high school, And so I understand that, we wanted to, that it seems like we're adding a whole lot more seats. I don't know that we actually are. And Adrian, feel free to answer this question, and Rachel, jump in as well. To your first point, where West always just wanted to just add 9th graders to our existing numbers, I get all that, and I remember those discussions. Is it better for us to add 9th graders without adding All-State capacity, or is it better to proportionately add numbers to All-State when we add freshmen? I guess that's where I am, because if it's better to add more seats, which I think most of us would agree on, then this is our opportunity to do that. And 2027 contract with Aqualand's giving us the opportunity to increase that capacity. So that's why the committee unanimously decided to jump in there and make it happen. Adrian?
Yeah, so now I do have a question then, and I guess this would be for like, if you know the information for East Tennessee and Middle Tennessee, do you all sixth graders, are they participating in you all's unacquired regional unacquires? Because ours don't. They typically do the general music, and so now I think we're going to be at another dilemma on the west side because we're seventh, eighth, and nine for our junior high choir. Sixth graders are not eligible to audition at all.
I don't know about East. I know in Middle Tennessee, it's seventh and eighth grade.
So I think what happens for us, then our junior high choir is going to suffer because those ninth grade boys, or just those ninth grade voices, period, will be less in that junior high choir because they will be now eligible for the senior high choir in order to be a part of all state. And then again, that may be a regional thing that we have to decide. But I guess that's what I'm looking at. Our numbers will be off if we only had, I think at the beginning of the process, we may have had 12 kids. There were ninth graders that auditioned for All State this year, and only 5 qualifiers. So we're back at that number again.
Well, but I mean, if 5 out of 12 qualified against 11th and 12th graders, that shows me that you're going to have a lot more when they're all auditioning against just 10th graders. So I think at that point, like as far as the ninth graders, now as far as middle school, I mean, I don't know what to say about that. That'll be something that West has to decide, if and how they're going to, manage that part of it.
Right. So what we did maybe this was last year or year before last, we amended our bylaws so that any ninth grader that auditions for junior high and they actually make that choir, they're ineligible to audition for for all state.
Mhm.
Only the kids who make the senior high unacquired are eligible to audition for all state. So
Right.
I think it's just going to put us at a dilemma now because we're going to be missing voices for that junior high choir.
Right. So I mean, I think one thing we have to remember in all of this is that we are going to undergo seismic changes in the fall of 2026, one way or the other, right? Like when we're moving all state to 2027, regardless of how you feel about that, that ship has sailed, right? Like we are locked into all state the first weekend in January, or maybe the second. We got to go back; it's different, but we are locked into an early January all state through 2034. And that gives us about 18 months to figure out how the heck we're going to do this. And with that's going to come growing pains and a lot of realignment. The good news is we are blessed with time and resources to figure that out now. I know for Middle Tennessee, we're going to eventually have a lower number of freshman girls that end up making mid-state by virtue of this realignment. In East Tennessee, it's going to be a little bit easier for them in one way because they currently have all of their all East choirs from middle school, ninth grade, and 10 through 12, all at one location on the same weekend. So they're going to go from 5 choirs down to 4. So things are going to get a little bit easier for them. And even though they're going to have to reallocate how they do auditions. So I guess what I'm saying is like knowing that all these changes are going to happen anyway. This is an opportunity for us to look at how we're doing it. And is this the best way? I know in East, they have built in guaranteed representation, per school into their regional honor choirs. TMEA is not at all saying that they can't do that. Maybe WTVA wants to do that instead of having a Northwest Southwest. And please hear me clearly. I'm not inserting myself in how West Tennessee does, your honor choirs, because that's not what this proposal is about. But if we know these changes are coming down anyway, this is our opportunity to build it in a student-centered way that's going to work for what we need it to be. So all these are questions that this Tiger team is going to have to come together and figure out.
Gotcha. And I don't want to keep dominating the question. What you call it? So somebody else has their hand up, Brian. I can't see because I'm driving, so I
Sure.
apologize if I keep jumping in there. I do have a question. Again, I told you I like this model. And the only thing that I'm afraid of is that we won't be prepared. I mean, it sounds really good, but I think it's a lot that we might need to rethink, especially now that we do have that January, mandate with Opryland. And I don't know, this may not be, I don't know, this may be something for the Tiger team. Is it possible for maybe 2027, the focus be to add the middle school choir and allow ninth graders just to fit in till we can really figure out a system? Because it, like you said, it may end up being that everyone's regional choir will have to look the same across the state in order for this to work, because everyone has a different system.
Yeah.
And I hate that because we did so much work, on this proposal, but we didn't know that we were going to be signing a 7-year contract with whatever it is, how many years, with Opryland.
Right. Go ahead, Rachel.
Sorry. Another thing that I just wanted to just throw out there is, and again, these are just things that, directors ask me. And that is, there is a frustration that it looks like this is going to be implemented before the middle school choir is implemented, when we have already, we voted that in on our caucus in 2019. Now, cards on the table, I'm well aware that a lot of the reason that the middle school choir wasn't implemented had to do with, COVID. We didn't have a conference for 2 years because of COVID, and also because of spacing issues. But that is a question that that I have gotten a lot in response to this proposal. Is we're adding an ensemble that's not the one that we've already voted. And the ensemble that we voted in, the middle school ensemble, is only it's set up to running pretty much just like the treble honor choir, where it's really just an overnight thing. So, I'm just putting that out there because I'm fielding a lot of questions about that as well. I don't know if you are. I don't know if anybody has, expressed that concern to you, but it's just another thing that I get a lot of emails about, and not just emails from West Tennessee. I have gotten emails from other areas of the state that we're doing this thing with the freshmen, but we haven't implemented something that we voted um, in 2019.
Here's how I would field those questions. I mean, Rachel, you and I have been involved in different ways with the TMEA leadership over the last many years together. Has there ever been a time that TMEA leadership has said, no, we can't do a middle school choir?
They've told me that they didn't have space for it.
But I mean, I guess where I'm coming down, like this proposal that you and me and Adrian voted for back in 2023, and then again in October of this school year when we decided to put it back out there, this committee unanimously worked on this and unanimously voted for it. And this proposal came into being because people got together and asked the questions and made it happen. And so, like, I guess where I'm coming from, that hasn't happened on the middle school side of things. One thing I like about this proposal is the idea that we control what we control. And one thing we can control is using this Tiger team, as we're determining how West is going to do it in middle and how the state's going to do it. I want to make sure I didn't cut out there. As a Tiger team's doing that, to identify middle school directors from each region who are ready to take that ball and run with it. To my knowledge, there has not been a proposal on how on a middle school all-state would come to fruition, in the same way that there's a proposal on how freshmen will be added. I agree, Dustin. We will get more middle school directors there when we have a middle school all-state choir. There's nobody that wants an all-state choir more than I do. But there has not been a fleshed out proposal that's, you know, gone through the process that we're going through right now on how to add freshmen. I guess we could even argue that TMEA leadership was so for adding capacity to All-State that they voted against what our committee decided to do in 2023. We said to wait on adding freshmen, and you know, all of us voted for that, and then they decided to do it anyway. So I don't think that there's ever been a time that TMEA said we can't do an all-state middle school choir. I think what needs to happen is we need to get a proposal together, much like the one that we're discussing right now, on how we're going to do it. To what Adrian was saying, like, can we start the middle school choir in 2027? I'll tell you, man, we are a lot closer on adding freshmen than we are on creating a middle school choir. There is so much discrepancy on how regional auditions are done on the vocal side, not as much on the instrumental side. Like, they could probably add a middle school band and orchestra pretty quickly, but we are light years away from each other on what Middle Tennessee middle schoolers do versus West Tennessee middle schoolers and East Tennessee middle schoolers. We're gonna have to work all that out to make sure we have a viable audition process before we talk about middle school all-state. Layers like, what happens if a boy auditions as an alto in September, but he's singing tenor by January? Do we allow him to stay in all-state, or do we make him re-audition? Like, all these are things that have to be codified and put on paper before we can ever implement an all-state. So that's kind of where we are. I think it's time to add an middle school all-state choir. We just got to get people up there to make it happen.
Hey, Dr. Russell.
Yeah.
This is Michael Chester. It's good to see everybody. I do want to make mention to that yes, the proposal was brought forth before the TMEA board, but the proposal for middle school, adding a middle school choir, has just been tabled because, again, to go back to what Dr. Russell said, the desire for it was there, but how we flesh it out was never proposed. One thing that you will have to all understand is that our contract with Opryland for 2027 was built around the idea of adding 3 middle school ensembles in addition to the ORF ensemble. And that would be a middle school choir, that would be a middle school string orchestra, and a middle school band. Now, we don't have all of that fleshed out currently right now, which is why at TMEA, for the first time ever, we are actually going to have a middle school teacher caucus. So it will be a cross section of content areas, but our middle school chair, Reggie Coleman, who is also our TMEA equipment chair, is the chairperson for middle school teachers. And it's an opportunity for us to kind of just, again, talk about, you know, the needs for middle school teachers are different than high schools. And there's a lot of considerations within each content area. So, you know, there's a lot of things that still have to be ironed out. I would imagine, and I won't speak for it, but I would imagine that as we are creating Tiger teams, not only on the choral side, but also on the instrumental side, that will be something that will probably have to be a part of that. So I hope everybody understands that the desire for TMEA is that we understand that needs to happen. We want it to happen, but you also have to understand that, you know, a lot of the limitations that we've had the same contract for years and years and years, and we've never been able to grow our conference. Now we're actually able to grow our conference because it is a great opportunity for us to bring more middle school directors to our conference so that they can get professional development. And on top of that, their students be able to participate in an honors ensemble event, very similar to the Tennessee Treble Choir. So we are making steps to make that happen. So I just want to make sure, you know, everybody on this call understands that, you know, we haven't forgotten about that. But right now, I think the ideas for this particular informants is about how the high school all-state stuff would work. So we do plan on putting that in the works. But like everything else, we're using the time now to get that fleshed out and to get all the appropriate parties together so that we can come across the state and find consensus.
Dre.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just have a question, and when we're talking about in terms of planning ahead and I guess having proposals met for things, what was the ideal or even proposal set forth when saying that this creates more opportunities for our students, but yet it's going to be less affordable for them? So how are we exactly creating opportunities for them with a plan set forth versus just kind of throwing things in the air?
Are you talking about the renewed contract with Opryland, 2024?
Yeah, the renewed contract with Opryland, of course, but again, that being done, but also in terms of the accessibility of the honor choirs. I know a statement was just made about there was a desire for middle school choirs. The proposal for the choirs went forth, but there wasn't a proposal as to how that was going to happen. That was back in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, 2023, and the new proposal comes around to add the freshmen. But yet there was no plan. But all of this, from what I'm just hearing Mr. Chester say, this was all these changes were geared towards, or the change for January rather was geared towards these choirs being able to be had, but there was no plan for them. So what was the action plan to say, okay, move it to January and this is how it's going to work? If there was an action plan being looked for in terms of adding middle school choirs. Because I just don't see how that resource is still readily available for our students if moving the conference does add more space, but it costs our students more money, more funds, more resources that programs likely don't have in order to still participate, whether you have middle school choirs, freshman choirs or not.
Yeah, let me jump in there on the price tag on it. And you know, Dre, you've known me for a little while, and I'm sure you were in on the conversations that a lot of us had that last summer. I hate the price tag that comes with our new Opryland contract. But at the same time, that's not what today's about. You know, in terms of, you know, the renewed contract with Opryland and moving it to January, you and I might not like every part of it, but it's also in the past.
Well, no, the question is about the planning and procedures that were leading to this space being needed, the space being agreed to, but yet there isn't plan and procedure to make these honor choirs happen, which was just said by Mr. Chester.
No, listen, I think that's what we were all saying a second ago. The reason that an all-state middle school choir has not been presented is because a middle school all-state choir has not been presented. The reason that this proposal is coming forth about how to add freshmen in there is because Rachel and Kristen and Lorna and TJ and Susan and me and Adrian all came together and voted on how to make the proposal happen. Like, this was a committee that met for 7, 8, 9 months and determined this is how the best way for us to add ninth graders into it. We revisited it this past fall and we presented it back in December. And there's been a lot of movement gone toward it. I don't know that that level of detail work has been done on how to add a middle school choir. And that's the next step. I feel confident that if folks get together and come up with like their being a middle school all-state choir, here's what the auditions would look like, here's what the placement procedure would look like, here's, you know, how many students we would have per part. Like, all those things have to happen before we can vote on something. All we did in 2019 is voted that, yes, this is something we want to do. And now we're ready for the next step. Adrian.
Yeah, you kind of answered my question. To answer your question, Dre, basically, the as Rachel was saying, the space was the issue, which is what kind of tabled the middle school choir. Although, as Michael, said, the goal of the contract was to add a middle school choir. Once it got tabled, unfortunately, it got put on the back burner. Once we got ninth graders put on there, the committee that Brian's read off were all high school teachers. So there wasn't any representation from the middle school directors to move the plan forward. So unfortunately, we kind of jumped ahead of the middle school proposal that happened in 2019, and we made the ninth graders a priority, which is, part of the problem. I don't know what it looks like on the band side or the orchestra side, but we just don't have any vocal music teachers from middle school that are represented at TMEA. I think it was embarrassing 2 years ago when we had Derek Fox there, and he was specializing in middle school music, and he did a shout out to all the middle school directors in the room, and there was not one. So I think that's a problem, but as Brian is saying, right now we're addressing ninth graders being added. So
I guess that's kind of where I feel like starting at either side, whether you start at getting the middle school together or getting the freshman choir together and then editing how you do 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. Whether you start from 10th, 11th, 12th grade or you start from middle school, you're still going to lead yourself to the same centralized problem, which is essentially, from what I'm hearing, what to do with the 8th and 9th graders, with whether it be a voice change or whether it be the eligibility for either or choir. You're still going to run into the same issue. And I just feel like that the better place to start in terms of creating proposals and planning will be with middle school, because we kind of already have things set forth for our high schoolers already, at least the 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. I think, either way, it's going to lead you to a sticky situation, but I kind of feel that it's going to become more sticky if that middle school isn't addressed first.
Oh, you unmuted. I thought you were going to say something.
Hi, Brian.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is Sarah McLemore. I am the middle school representative for WTVMEA on our board. Is there that position in the middle area in East Tennessee? So the middle school representatives from each board could come together and possibly start the Tiger Task Force for this middle school implementation. So we're not just pulling middle school directors that may be fresh teachers that have great ideas, but they don't know all the logistics or just thinking, you have to have a starting point. But is there a middle school representative per region?
Yeah, and like on the 14th page of the proposal, like other things to consider, how and when should TMEA add middle school all-state choirs? Should it be a treble and a mixed choir? Does Gaylord have space, which we do? Who from our regions will lead these efforts? Like, I think, starting that process and starting to get people together who are going to make that happen is a part of this proposal. But adding middle school to it is not a part of this proposal. But we are ripe for a proposal to be had.
Right. But that's been the last few minutes discussion. I was just thinking, well, who are our starting people? So that to me makes sense. If we already have 3 people across the state, we could at least have that kind of taken care of. The other 2 things I wanted to ask about with all state was about the first tier and second tier, and also sight reading. So when we are talking about our freshmen, whether they are auditioning for senior high all state or they're auditioning for junior high all state, as it may be in the future, what are we looking at as far as the tier 1, tier 2 testing? Are we looking at, because the all state is backing up to January, are we looking at a tier 1 happening in the previous school year for 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, maybe in April, and then having a second tier the first weekend of September? I mean, I don't know how, because everything's going to overlap with All West. So I'm trying to figure out, like, what are we talking about as far as the implementation of how these 9th graders are going to be successful in their all-state auditions, and still be a part of that with the tiers as they are, the testing as it is, and then your regionals as they are. So is there any idea about how that is laid out? Maybe I missed it in the proposal, but is there any logistical information on that?
And inform me what you mean by tier 1 and versus tier 2.
So in all state auditions, we do a tier 1 process. And Rachel, you can speak on this. Adrian, as I'm aware, this is what we do in West Tennessee. I don't know about Middle and East Tennessee, but this is kind of a way of being able to rigorously rate the students based on what their abilities and skill levels are. Tier 1 all state auditions. And then they have additional select music that is all state music that is a tier 2 audition. So
if I'm in 10th grade and I live in Obion County, I first auditioned for Northwest, like all Northwest
regionals, yes,
right? And then there's a first tier and a second tier beyond that
for all state.
For all state.
Hey,
yeah, go ahead, Rachel.
We have a separate all-state audition
Right.
because we are divided into subregions, but our allotments for all-state are not divided. So we have a separate all-state auditions to appoint our all-state allotments.
West wants to do that. I don't see a vehicle by which we're auditioning people for the 26-27 All-State in the 25-26 school year, like doing something the April before. I think it all has to fit in that fall semester. But again, this is something that's going to be unique to West because West is the only region that has regional audition and then 2 tiers of all-state auditions. And so I guess West can just kind of look at best practices and how you guys want to move forward with that. I think you have complete autonomy for that.
So one,
Hey, Brian.
sorry.
Well, just to clarify, Brian, it's not necessarily 2-tiered auditions. Basically, those kids from the sub-regions audition against, as Rachel was saying, to be the representatives for all state. From there, what the second tier, what Sarah's referring to, is really the octet testing. It's basically to make sure that they know their music.
And octet testing is
Which
what
is
I was
whatever.
talking about with Daniel earlier, that I think would have to move online if we're really going to do a statewide panel for each part, you know.
Well, I just want to clarify. That's what Sarah was saying between the first and second tier.
Yeah.
Thank you, Adrian. My apologies for making that confusing. The other thing, Brian, you mentioned early in your presentation about sight reading and that you would love for sight reading to move into dotted rhythms, 8th and 16th notes and really progress. So do we have something that we're measuring for these 9th graders coming in, whether they're split with all state, senior high, or they're split with a potential all state junior high? And how much does sight reading actually count?
These are all things that each region determines for themselves. And that's the beauty of it. If Middle Tennessee decides that we're going to, we don't have, like Middle Tennessee sight reading is the same right now, grades 9 through 12. And that's all I can only speak about Middle Tennessee because that's what I know. And it's 1 leap of a third within the tonic triad, half notes, whole notes, quarter rest. Oh, and there is 1 dotted quarter note followed by 8th note. Like that is pretty well prescribed, and it's only 4 measures. When we added sight reading 12 years ago, 18% passed. Now it's 80%. So in Middle Tennessee, I think it would be foolish for us not to consider changing those levels with precision over time, because we've proven that whatever we put out there, the teachers will teach. So it serves our students better to add, to add rigor to what we're doing, but to do it in a way that's feasible for our region and our teachers. So in terms of sight reading, whatever West Tennessee wants to do for sight reading, West Tennessee is going to do. I think if we're talking about all state, we might ought to have some minimum requirements that students are able to meet, but that's what the Tiger team is. We currently don't have that. We let each region do whatever they want for sight reading. So that's where, the 3 regions will come together and decide, here's what we decide is important for us as a state. And then each region can figure out how to implement that. But
do you think that would change the numbers of our 9th graders, and their involvement if they know that they have to do sight reading at the state level, or do you think it will be a deterrent at all?
Well, and this is where do 9th graders sight read as a part of your audition process right now?
I'm new to the high school process, so I'm trying to recall. Adrian, can you?
Not for the regional honor choir. Everyone's required for all state auditions, though.
Thank you, Adrian. I was recalling that as well.
I know that it was a deterrent when we added sight reading. Again, only a dozen years ago that we added it as a state, and it did not go well. And it takes time for us to get better at it. That's what I was talking about earlier, that our auditions can be a reflection of what we think is important. If we think that sight reading is important, let's determine as a state and as a region, here's what we think is important for 9th graders to know in September of their first year. And that ought to be different than what 12th graders are sight reading. So with time, all of this stuff will service our students best. But we get to decide what that is. That's the beauty of the proposal.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone answer this? Do we think it's better for us to add 9th graders and keep the choirs the same size? Like, Is that a better choice for our students? All things equal, if we didn't have any history or past, like, do we want fewer opportunities for 10th through 12th graders to make All-State just because we're adding freshmen? Or does it serve us better to add 25% capacity because we're adding freshmen?
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
Brian, I don't know if you can see in the chat, Lindsay Patterson, I think her last comment was towards that. Basically, she was agreeing with Rachel earlier, with saying that in the beginning of this, we were just trying to get those ninth graders who can qualify for All-State to participate. And so it looks like she's reiterating that again, what you just asked. If we could just for now allow the freshmen to audition against the upperclassmen until we see what this looks like before moving forward with another ensemble. I hope I said that correctly, Lindsay.
So Lindsay and Kenzie, you're saying that it's better not to add seats to All-State, even though we're adding freshmen. But Adrian and Rachel, you all voted to add the seats. Or are you also saying that like something's changed since we talked about this back in October, or since we voted on it back in October, and now you're saying we should just keep it the same?
I think so. I think what the concern is on this side again is I think when we did this a couple of years ago, we were unaware that we would be signing, additional years with Opryland, which is now a cost issue for West Tennessee. And so I think that's what's playing out in this and saying, hey, can we slow the roll to see how this is going to work? I was on a little bit of the Middle Tennessee meeting earlier, so I didn't really get a chance to hear the full context, but I did hear you mention something about if there's like a snow date that the conference will be moved later. And, that hadn't been presented to West. We didn't even know that was a possibility. So I heard that was the first time I've heard that. So there's just still a lot of uncertainty about, moving forward with Opryland from here on out. And I hope I'm saying that correctly. And if not, Lindsay, chime in.
Hey, Brian, let me turn my video back on because I like to look at people when I talk to them. I think okay, it's hard to look at this through the lens of there not being a past. But I will tell you that at its core, I don't dislike the proposal, so I don't want you to think that I'm trying to just pick a side here. But when we talked about wanting to add ninth graders, we heard some of the most, I'm just going to say, ridiculous excuses for why people did not want to add them. I heard things ranging from there are no ninth graders that could qualify to sing in our all-state ensembles as they are. We're worried about the behavior of ninth graders at all-state. We're worried about having, and this is something that I heard from a director, we don't want 14-year-old girls around 17 and 18-year-old boys. I mean, some of the most ridiculous, dumbest things you've ever heard in your life. So I think the consensus is, at least over here on this end of the state, is can we just see how it works with the few ninth graders that we have? Let's see what the behavior is like. Let's see what what the dynamic is like having those kids at All-State. And can we just see what happens? Like,
Well, and as you and I know, we already have years of data of instrumental ninth graders being there, and no 14-year-old girl has been the victim of a 17-year-old trombone player, right? So you and I both know
of
that was an
course,
asinine
I know that.
argument to begin with.
I'm just saying that those are the things that that people would say to us in our face when we
Right.
said we want to bring our freshmen, like, oh no, you can't because of this, this, and the third.
Correct.
And
No,
so
I'm glad that we, the choral educators, got beyond that and voted in to add ninth graders to All-State. Like that was a win for our students, you know?
I agree.
And so good for us but I'm not going to base decisions based on dumb arguments like I can't trust my 14-year-olds to be around there. First of all, some freshmen are nearly driving because they have early birthdays, I mean, like there's so many reasons why that argument, we don't need to consider that in here.
I agree.
You know?
I
And in
would just
terms
like
of
to
like
see-
waiting to see how it's going to go, we also have this year and next year that we will have play out before we ever implement this new thing. I think we would be doing the choral students in this state a disservice if we didn't add capacity to All-State when we're adding capacity to the auditions, especially now that we have the opportunity to add. I mean, we're talking about adding 160 seats, not 160 freshmen. Like that's important to remember. We're not talking about doing that. We're talking about adding 160 seats. And man, why would we not want to do that for the choir students in Tennessee? If we're worried about letting it play out, we'll have 2 years. And if over those 2 years, terrible things happen, we can go back and adjust. But that's where I think why we came up with this proposal is that, well, yeah, Instrumental doubled the number of kids they had. How dare we add freshmen without adding a single seat in there? That doesn't make sense. That's what we came up with. And so I think what this proposal does is it gives the choral music educators in this state 100% control over how we do that. From this conversation to the motion that we're about to create, to the meeting next month, to the Tiger team that's going to work for 18 months to 3 or 4 years out in the future. And we're put in a position where we have the time to build it the right way and go from there. And each region can look outward and inward as far as how we're going to do it. So I think that's the beauty of the proposal that we came up with.
So Brian, so quick question. So what I'm hearing that we probably need to we just off of what you said, we have 25 and 26 to allow our current system to go the way it is. In the meantime, the Tiger team will be observing and taking data and everything like that. So what would that mean? Because I think the other thing that might be the concern is that if we move to, vote on this at the caucus, then I think people feel like this proposal is locked in stone and there won't be any modifications that can be made. Or will the Tiger team, is this a proposal? Are we saying we're going to move towards and we're going to look at this and the Tiger team will adjust the proposal based off of what we see happen over the next 2 years? Because that may calm a lot of folk as well.
Yeah, I think what's important is that yeah, I mean, we're going to move toward a proposal that we can start working toward, because if we are going to make these changes, we need to start working on them now, But just like the 9 of us got together and came up with this, proposal, the 9 of us can come together and say, hey, this is not working. The middle school a Tiger team that was just Sarah brought up a minute ago, they can come in and say, hey, we think we can get this built by next year. Let's make it happen. It's important that we all remember we are TMEA. TMEA is not a service that we consume. These honor choirs are not things that we serve to our students. We are directly involved in how they are shaped and formed and run. From sitting there and judging auditions to sitting in the room and supervising to being state choral chair like you. We are TMEA. Chester is not any more TMEA than all the rest of us. Adrian's not more TMEA because he's state choral chair. I'm not more TMEA because we're all state choral chair. We have 100% control over how this goes out. I think what this proposal gives us is the blessing of time to say this is a way that we can do this that is feasible by each of our regions, gives our regions 100% control over how it's going to play out, both at a state level and a regional level. And then it gives us the blessing of 18 months to put it in place. All right, guys, it's been what, 75 minutes. What other concerns discussion do we need to have here?
Brian, I think if there's a way, I don't know if since you were able to attend all three, maybe if you can do maybe like a summarization of what was found per meeting, or I don't know, maybe make, I don't know if people want to go and watch an hour long of each region's video, but if some type of way we can have a summarization that goes along with the proposal, just to kind of put some of people, put people kind of at ease that this
Yeah.
is not a bad thing,
Right.
but definitely putting at the top for those middle school directors that are like, hey, I think we're yet being forgotten about. That this is going to be included in this proposal as a task force moving forward, not something that that's going to happen until it's not going to happen next year, but just so that they know, because I think that's the thing. I think it's just the fear so much. TMEA is making some changes that we haven't been able to see the progress on yet, and it doesn't mean that we won't see it. But it's just a lot that has changed over this last year alone, and I think that's just why some people are kind of a little apprehensive about everything right now.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying it's a good thing and all that stuff. I agree. Like, it might feel like there's going to be changes because there are, and that's going to happen in 26, 27. And in terms of like, seeing the changes, that's what today is. Today is looking at how the sausage is made and then making it happen. So in terms of next steps, like I said, one thing that has to happen is we have to turn this proposal into an actionable motion that we can discuss 1 month from the day at 3 p.m. on our statewide Zoom. I think that will serve as the default, summary of all the three meetings today. I've recorded all three meetings. We're going to put them on YouTube and send those out so that anyone who wants to, it'll be 100% transparency that people can see what was discussed at each three meetings. And then we can go from there. Daniel Massey.
Thanks for remembering my name instead of Dan's phone. Appreciate it. And I think 100% that adding the ninth graders in the way that that everyone's deciding to do at TMEA is noble, and with the different choirs and whatnot. But I would just want to send the message, and I feel like I speak for a lot of directors in West Tennessee, that I really wish we could have added that junior high group. And I know that there's challenges with it, but I mean, that is kind of like my overall feeling of all this. But again, the intentions seem noble, so I'm in support. I just wish there could be the middle schools, because we're nothing without the middle schools.
Yeah. Hey, all it takes is people to get together to type out what it needs to be and
it's true.
Bring it to the state and make it happen.
All right.
This meeting is happening. This proposal is happening because Rachel and Adrian sat on that committee, and all of us got together and put, ask questions and put it down on paper.
Gotcha,
so
man.
That's what needs to happen on the middle school side of things, and we'll absolutely make it go.
Yeah. All right. Hey, I appreciate you, Brian.
Yeah, man.
Thanks, man.
Janet, would you unmute?
Yeah. So I just want to clarify, as far as middle school goes, everybody keeps saying like we wish that it could happen and all of that. Is there space for it in 27? Wasn't that the original intention of moving state back to January, was that there would be room for those middle school ensembles?
That was one of the layers involved in moving it to January.
Okay. So who's to say that we couldn't still get a middle school up and going by then?
Absolutely, we can. I hope we do.
Okay. I know Sarah mentioned the three
TMEA
regional people.
Yeah. Sorry.
But I mean, could each region create some kind of committee and, go all together and do all of that?
Absolutely.
I know Dustin said he'd be willing to help out with that. And I'm sure there's other middle school directors, Sarah, probably myself, Dustin, and there's probably a few others that would be willing to make that happen. I know as a teacher that teaches 6th grade through 12th grade, I have 6th graders able to go to treble choir, and I have 9th through 12th grade that can go to all state as well. And the 7th and 8th graders are going but Miss Sane, why can't we go? And that's a problem as a teacher to have to explain to them, well, there's just nothing for you. So yeah, I'm all for making it happen.
Well, so let's talk 100% facts here. We the no nuts and bolts have ever been discussed. Since my connection's unstable, sorry. No nuts and bolts have ever been discussed on a state level. No proposal has ever been presented to the caucus, to regions, or to a state committee that could make this happen.
Hey, Brian.
And so I think that's the next step is we get that going. Absolutely, we could launch an all-state choir by 2027.
Hey,
Rachel.
Brian. I don't want to dwell on this because I know that's not why we're here.
Yeah.
But there was a proposal that was voted on in 2019.
It included like, here's how many seats are going to be and how the
Yeah.
auditions are going to handle.
Yes.
And oh, I'd love to see it. I don't remember that. I just remember it was a very abstract, this is what we want to do.
Yeah, I was going to say, Rachel, I was at that 2019 meeting, and I just remember that it was proposed, but that the TMEA board tabled it at that point, that there wasn't like a fleshed out, this is how the auditions would work. This is how the selections would be across the state. And this was the consensus from all three regional organizations. I remember that it was passed in caucus to bring before the TMEA board at that point, but I don't actually recall like an actual, as Dr. Russell had said, like an actual nuts and bolts of this is the procedure. So if that does exist, that's awesome, because that'll save a lot of time.
Now, I will say that it is nowhere near in depth of what the work that Brian has done on this proposal.
That we did.
Because I was a baby in leadership, and so I was not well versed in writing a proposal. But there was a choice between two different ways to add a middle school choir, and the one that we voted on was it was the one where the middle school choir is set up pretty much just like the treble honor choir, as far as how you do the auditions, and the time, just like one overnight thing.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to send that to you. I do still have it.
Yeah. And to to Janet and Sarah and Dustin, who were talking about this earlier, I think we have to get middle school directors together to talk about it. I'm happy to be involved with that, or to stay the heck out, whatever you middle school directors want from me. As all-state choral chair, I've been doing it for a little while. I'm happy to say, here's what works well, here's what doesn't, here's things to consider. In an advisory way, I'm happy to be involved, or just butt out. But know that I'm happy to lend that layer of it as well. In terms of actionable steps, I'm going to take data from today, turn the proposal into a actual motion, try to email that out sometime before March 23rd, reminding everyone about the Zoom that we have in a month. And I think that has to be our opportunity to poke holes in it. We can't show up on the 23rd saying, well, this works and this doesn't work. Rather, when we get it on March 10th or whatever date that we end up getting it, that's the time to read it and poke holes, and then reach out to your leadership and have the conversations about it. And then let's have conversations about it on March 23rd, because we just won't have that much time at caucus to dwell on it. So we're going to want to poke holes in it and get it just right on March 23rd. And then we do that, we vote and see how it lands. And then hopefully we'll have any closing thoughts? All right. Well, if there are none, thanks, guys. Thanks for showing up today.
And thank you, everybody. And thank you to the team that kind of put this proposal together. So, yeah, and I wish everybody the best of luck for those of you guys that are going into assessment.
All right. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Brian.
See y'all.